and welcome to a brand new episode of FI Live. Thanks so much for joining us. I am Susan Choi, as I hope you already know because you've been watching other FI Lives. I am Susan Choi, Digital Director of the Food Institute, the single best source of food industry news, data, and trends for almost 100 years. Creative collaborations, articles, podcasts, webinars, special sponsorship opportunities, and live streams like these, you name it, we have it. Please check us out at www.foodinstitute.com for more information and to sign up to subscribe to be a member of our amazing organization. I also want to mention that we have a special announcement to make on Wednesday, October 12th. Stay tuned for that. Please check out all of our platforms and our website. There it is. Thank you, Brittany, my faithful producer, bringing that up. Such a nice graphic. Thank you to Fu, our amazing graphic designer who made that nice little picture. We have a special announcement to make. What is it? Is it something to do with the virtual world, an avocado, the globe? I don't know. You'll have to find out. Wednesday, October 12th, www. Don't want to lead you astray, .foodinstitute.com. You do not want to miss that event. Okay, let's get into it. The moment you've been waiting for, let's talk frozen yogurt. It was invented in the 70s. It rose to fame in the 80s. It stayed popular through the 90s into the 21st century to today, thanks to brands like 16 Handles. And we have the founder of 16 Handles here with us. Solomon Choi opened up his first shop in New York City in 2008, grew the business to 40 locations across the globe. How did he do this? How did he disrupt the industry? He's here today to tell us all of his secrets, right? Solomon, you're going to share with us how to grow our own businesses so they can be as successful as yours was. Solomon Choi of 16 Handles, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much. Okay. So I want to get into it. I brought up a little bit. Oh, actually, you know what? First, I want to ask you a little pop quiz question just for fun. Do you know who invented frozen yogurt?
I do not.
It was, as far as my research told me, it was the HP Hood Company. You know, like Hood Milk. They founded it in the 1970s. They called it Frogurt. That's what they called it, and they called it a frozen dessert. It was supposed to be, a new alternative to ice cream. So that's my little tidbit for you and for the audience out there. So, but anyway, let's get into it. I want to bring up first a few background facts about 16 Handles to get everyone up to speed. As I said before, it was founded in 2008. And hopefully you don't have to correct me, Solomon. Hopefully I did my homework right. It was founded in 2008. You opened your first location in the East Village in New York City. It grew to 40 locations in 5 states and two countries. And you recently sold it in August of this year to Neil Hirschman, 27-year-old Neil Hirschman, if I'm correct, an entrepreneur, and Danny Duncan, major YouTube star, millions of views, millions of dollars sold in merch. He himself is also, part of that young generation for an undisclosed amount, AKA a lot of money, probably. You definitely grew the brand to something extremely successful and profitable. So congrats to that. And that's part of why we want you here today. We want to talk to you about what you did. How did you create such a successful business? But I first want to ask you, I want to take it back to the beginning. Why frozen yogurt? Why did you want to build a frozen yogurt place?
That's a great question. And yes, all of those facts are indeed true. So no correction.
All right, excellent.
So, how I got into this was I grew up, so to speak, in the restaurant business. My father was a multi-unit franchisee of, at the time, a very popular all-you-can-eat Japanese buffet franchise. And he was based in California. He had 3 locations. And so very early on, I got a taste of what it was, since I was in high school, to see what it was like living with a restaurateur and a franchisee. And I had the opportunity to work with him when he essentially poached me in a turnaround situation for one of his restaurants in San Diego. And I went down there, turned the business around amidst a lot of competition, and we successfully sold it to a new buyer. And so it was at that point that I was able to really lean into the things I loved, which were A, hospitality, B, marketing and branding, which is what I studied in undergrad, and 3, the entrepreneurial spirit of being able to kind of take a brick and mortar business and be able to shape it in a way where, you know, you're really judged with success by how many times people are coming in and repeating that. And so it kind of scratched that itch in all things. After that sale, I joined a startup hospitality group, and we had opened up several Japanese restaurants, full service sushi restaurants, teppanyaki grill restaurants. And the CEO of the company bought the rights to a gelato franchise. It was actually a Texas-based gelato franchise, and I wore many hats in that organization. One of which became the director of franchise development for this gelato franchise. The CEO of the company bought the rights to Southern California, and so he's like, Solomon, you're in charge of selling that. And so, trial by fire, I learned how to do that, and this was in 2006. So this was really when my main competitor at the time was not really other ice cream brands or gelato companies as much as it was kind of the advent of frozen yogurt, namely by the way of the pioneer in the 2000s, which was Pinkberry. And so Pinkberry kind of took the industry by storm, and I think that had the perfect storm. And the reason I'll say that is I think it was really the start of when people were focused more on, hey, what is it that I'm consuming? Are there better for you alternatives? And I think also the advent of social media, being able to now at scale be able to influence others and their purchasing decisions. And so when all those things happened, I said there was no shot that, I thought I was always good at sales, but I was like, there's no shot that I can sell, this Texas-based gelato franchise to people when it seemed like, both consumers and potential franchisees were very interested in frozen yogurt. And so for me, I'm not going to sit here and craft some story that I had this like childhood memory of that, but I did, however, when it came to naming the company, tie in kind of my childhood, which was I grew up in Southern California, and I grew up with 31 Flavors Baskin Robbins. And so the number, yes, it's an homage to wanting to own a number and what that represented, which was a lot of variety, being able to have a lot of different flavors and, feel like a kid in a candy store. And so I was able to kind of tie that in. But in terms of frozen yogurt, I really saw that as a new opportunity within business, within restaurant franchising. And specifically, I saw it as what I like to call the first kind of lifestyle segment within food that I saw. And by that, there's certainly a lot of those now, whether it was the Chipotles that have now become, again, this very much lifestyle brand, specifically to, the millennials and the Gen Z consumer. You could probably name those across the different food verticals, but I really felt that for frozen dessert, which quite frankly, even now, if you look, a lot of the biggest chains, franchise and as well as company owned, are ones that have been around for like 40, 50, 60 years, right? And so these are kind of like the grandparents' brand, the parents' brand. And so I really felt that there was an opportunity kind of aligning how consumers were really A, receiving their information, and then B, looking for something that was like current and modern. And I felt that fro-yo and really soft serve was really kind of the unique way of being able to do that. And so that's how I got into it.
Right. That's great. One thing I really found interesting what you said is you really liked the business model, the brick and mortar location, because it was a very tangible metric, right? You could just judge the success by the people physically coming in and out of the door. In this era, it was actually part of a question I already had that you've already answered, but I would want to ask, like, in this era, for someone who maybe still would want to open a brick and mortar location in this digital age, do you think it's still worth doing? Would you recommend that people would just focus on, online direct to consumer? What are your thoughts about maybe building a business based off of like a brick and mortar location today?
My suggestion on that is, I think coming back to this concept of what is it that you want to build. If you want to certainly get, high number of transactions, I think that in order to create a successful brand and one that has staying power, it's super important to meet the customer where he or she is. And so for me, like, the opportunity was by way of brick and mortar, but even through the evolution of 16 handles, we've been offering delivery, and we've been on the delivery platforms in New York City for over a decade. So it didn't take something like the pandemic to get us into having an off-premise strategy. It was really about, and I remember vividly, it was the second winter. It was the winter of 2010. And I was there at the East Village store, and I'd be receiving phone calls in the dead of winter, specifically when it's snowing, and customers are asking, do you deliver? Can I order for delivery? And, being in the Northeast where it does snow, you only want to say no so many times once you realize you're really leaving money on the table, but B, more importantly, I'm not allowing my customer who wants to be loyal and to engage with my product or service to do so in a way that's meaningful and conducive to their current condition. And so I really feel that omni-channel is and will be indefinitely a strategy that all brands, whether you're in food, whether you're in retail, I mean, even if you're in services, discovery happens online, but it also happens when you're walking or driving by what you usually do, whether it's for school, for work. And I'm a firm believer that, we're seeing a lot of, news and swelling around, cloud kitchens, dark kitchens, ghost kitchens. And I think it's super fantastic because it meets a need that was really wasn't met before. So to do a build out of one of these stores, and granted with the 16 handles, we were a smaller footprint store, 1,000 to 1,500 square feet, so relatively easy to get open. But again, when we're opening into strip malls, we're really limited by what retail is available for us, what commercial retail is available for us. I think the idea of being able to go into more digital realm where we can service a lot more people, especially as things like delivery and off-prem have increased in popularity and necessity, I do think that those options can backfill some of the missed opportunities and new markets that maybe we either can't go in because of whatever limitations. I mean, it could be, financial. It could also be just in terms of a reach by way of maybe you have another location, you don't want to cannibalize your own sales, but you do have pockets that aren't being reached. And so I do think that there's a time and a place for that. But what I can tell you is this, is one of the channels I was not able to successfully meet was obviously the direct to consumer by way of e-commerce. And that's simply because of form factors. You can see here, while we were able to figure out, and we were one of the earliest ones to figure out how do we deliver fro-yo and soft serve in 30 minutes or less without melting, you can't really ship this in 2 days and expect it to hold form factor. So that's the one area we weren't able to do. But like I said, we are very proud that 16 Handles was one of the first brands to have both third-party and native ordering from our website as well as from our app. And so again, meet the customer where she is. And you'll hear me say that a lot. We in 16 Handles would always use the word she, simply because that was the majority of our customer base. It was over 70% female by way of our social followers, by way of our loyalty programs. And quite frankly, if you spend any few hours in our stores, you'll see that that's probably the ratio that holds true. And so we refer to her as a she. And so it was very much about how is she communicating with her friends and her peer group, and how does she want to receive this product? And so for us, it was always, let's try to meet her where she is and make it convenient. So that way, as soon as that urge or that desire or that thought or that ad from 16 comes out, it's like, let's remove the barriers because maybe she can't go or doesn't want to. And so we can bring it to her. And so, I do believe that taking advantage of all those channels is mission critical now for any brand, whether existing or you're thinking of starting something. Look, some concepts, they may make more sense from a unit economic perspective to start as a direct-to-consumer e-commerce business or vice versa. But I think it's important to layer in a strategy, even if it's not executed upon immediately, to think like, how do we do that? Because by not activating one of those channels, you are missing out on not only continuing to serve the existing customer base that you're growing, but also those who may not or decide not to choose to go through the channel that you are offering.
Right. I what you were mentioning previously, really keeping track of your customers, your demographic, and seeing that your demographic was majority female, mostly of a younger age. And also what interested me is 16 Handles was started at a time where you didn't have the impact of social media that you have today. And so for me, I find it quite fascinating how you were able to keep up and even, forge a path even within this space that can be quite daunting, within, to the business world, within the food and beverage industry. You witness, as a business owner of 16 Handles, it's like, to me, it seems like you witnessed that rise, like the evolution of social media. How did you, as a business owner, as a CEO, be flexible to learn about, adapt to, and keep on top of that, that coming wave of social media, because that is like the lifeblood, right, of the younger generation, who is your customer base of 16 Handles.
100% agree. And I think in looking back and hindsight being 2020, so glad that we leaned into that. But that really started with a mindset. And as I mentioned before, I was maniacal about making sure that our product and our brand resonated with that customer base. More than anything else, that's one thing that I will take credit for, because I stayed focused on that and wanted to make sure that 16 Handles as a brand never forgot that and lost that in its DNA and why we exist. And so if why we exist is to make her happy, through creating these moments of celebration and, beautiful, opportunities to, eat this delicious product, it was important to, like I said, understand how she's communicating. The first store I opened in 2008, I was actually 27 years old. And so this is actually very interesting, full circle, how Neil, the new buyer, who was a franchisee of mine, is now, the CEO and the new owner. I feel like it's a passing of a torch, starting from one recession, going into the next, but, with a brand that's been able to, withstand that. But going back to your question specifically, I think that I had to learn really from my customer base. And that East Village location, what made it unique was not only the fact that I had 9 different frozen dessert competitors within a 3-block walking radius, which for anyone who's been in New York City, that's nothing, 3 blocks. But that's literally how many frozen dessert shops there were around 16 Handles. And so why that didn't deter me was, one, I didn't know New York City. I moved out there from Los Angeles. B, the buying behavior and even getting to a location, again, very different. I was used to driving everywhere. Most customers are coming in by way of walking, subway, or other form of transportation. And so I didn't understand how New York City worked, but I was, again, committed to understanding how that New York City customer was going to behave and how I could be there as, this delicious luxury for them. So with that, I really had to rely on my customer base to learn really how they were using social media. And that way I learned how it was organically being used as opposed to putting on this business hat, like as a corporation. Okay, how are we able to advertise or to be able to get more, views? And like, it was really just about, hey, you guys are all on your mobile phones, and I have a mobile phone. I'm not that old. I was 27, 28 years old at the time, but I didn't grow up, nor did I have in school things like, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Funny story, I'll never forget this. I remember there was another startup, social media startup called Foursquare, which still exists today.
Yeah.
But I remember that was really when they had just launched as well, and they were based in Cooper Union, so just a few blocks south of the 16 Handles location. And I remember getting an email from somebody in business development there, and got on a phone call, said, "Congratulations, you're one of the most checked in locations on our app, Foursquare." And I'm just like, I don't know what that means, but I have no money for you. They're like, no, we're not trying to sell you anything, but we want to, be able to send you collateral to promote that, because you're literally one of the, most checked in businesses. And so that also kind of, piqued my interest, because I thought, wow, it's not something that I promoted, but it's a natural behavior that my consumer base was doing. My guests were doing this, right? And they wanted to share this. They wanted to share their location and that they were at the 16 Handles. So in looking at that, I started doing a deeper dive. How else are they communicating? I knew how to use text and email, right? And that was kind of the extent of that. And so they really showed me, hey, I was like, hey, can you help me set up a good, Facebook business page? I remember that was one of the first things I asked.
Wow.
It was those freshmen, customers from NYU that really showed me how to do that. And then even unlock features. Like I remember, this is before paid, like everything was, super organic reach, and 100% of your followers would see anything that you posted. It was almost like like a group Slack or a WhatsApp. And I remember, because I was, one of the things that I wanted to do at 16 Handles was have the flavor, variety, and diversity. That was going to be what made us different, right? Not only do we have the most number of flavors in 16, but to be able to have rotating flavors on a daily basis. But how do I do that without just simply guessing and being reactive to what I think works? And one way I did that was, I remember the early days, and I had maybe like 230 like really committed followers on Facebook, and most of them were those NYU students. So to me, I'm like, you talk about a focus group, these are your brand ambassadors. Before, social, influencer brand ambassadors, these were like my literal paying customer brand ambassadors, the most valuable, the most important ones. And so I would ask them and do a Facebook poll, right? Hey, next Tuesday, 2 p.m., I'm going to drop one of these 2 flavors. Which one do you want to see? And I get those votes like real time. And so based on that, then when that announcement goes out, not only on Facebook, but then to our email blast, imagine if you're one of the 130 people who voted on a flavor, and then the store is saying, yes, we're going to put that into the handle next week. That doesn't feel like you're one of 130. That feels like you're one of one. It feels like 16 Handles and the owner, right, asked me what I wanted. I told them this, and they're going to do that. I mean, to be able to have that kind of, response and that kind of engagement, we wish that we could do that with our favorite brands. And so that's one of the things I learned with social is the real-time dialogue and the real-time engagement, and being able to model my business where I had the flexibility of being nimble, especially as a one unit store, to be able to have that and really have a transparent way of being able to share that with the community, with my most loyal fans, who then rewarded me with like, oh my gosh, you not only hear us, but you're actually listening to us, right? And so I thought that was super powerful. And so that just kept going forward. And then really social media as we know it today has really evolved, where anyone without that strategy, I mean, we're on it. I'm guilty of it myself. You know, I have a 5-year-old daughter. I dread the day that, you know, I get her first smartphone where she'll be on it as well and probably won't be looking me in the eyes, but it's inevitable. And I think the way that we consume and share information will continue down this path of whatever apps and channels are available. So again, just something that I fell into, but out of necessity. And I think being humble about it was what was the best thing, because they actually wanted to help me. Right? I didn't go in there thinking like, okay, or I'm going to pay someone to do it for me, because I was like, I need to learn how to do this myself. And eventually, as we grew and scaled, then obviously to be able to outsource those services. But early on, it was very much, hey, this is gold. This is a communication tool that I can really I can choose to embrace, or think, oh, whatever, I'll just stick to kind of what I know. And I think that that's one of the things that has always kept 16 Handles kind of top of mind and open when it comes to what are the newest channels. And for us, anything that's new and shiny, and you know, to be critical of myself, whether it's product, specifically when it comes to like digital communication technology, I love being the first. And I think having 16 Handles as a company and being able to do that and leverage the company to do it. Look, I've been wrong plenty of times, but when we're right, we get rewarded for that, because it's like, oh, okay, we have that first mover advantage, and you know, we can be kind of you know, a trendsetter in the space in terms of like, is this going to be adopted or not? And you know, I loved being in that position.
You know, at this point, you know, speaking like in a macro level, you know, we're now at a point where every business knows they have to have, you know, the basics of, you know, a Facebook, an Instagram, you know, maybe even a TikTok, Twitter account. They have to be out there on social media. From your own experiences, do you have any like tips off of the top of your head? Like what makes for like effective, you know, effective posting, effective, you know, when you're being really thoughtful and not just, oh, I need to put a post out there because we have to be out there on social media. You know, it's like in your own experiences, is there anything off the top of your head that you can share that you found was like an effective strategy of, you know, meaningful social media strategy?
Yeah, you know, that's one where any social media strategist or agency that manages this for brands or for people, you know, probably will have, you know, their own answer for. What I found to have the most success though were less about kind of these over created campaigns, and really just the storytelling of the aspects of the business or service that your customers are most drawn to. So for instance, a beautiful picture like this, right, will get the engagement from someone who loves this product, loves the swirl, loves the topping. Like it reminds them of the experience of why they come into a 16 Handles. But this in and of itself today, I would actually argue is less impactful than it used to be even, you know, 5 or 10 years ago. And that's simply because everyone is doing this, right? I mean, you've heard this terminology, food porn, right? It's this addictive thing where we constantly just want into our eyes all these beautiful pictures. And at one point there was, you know, a trend of over the top, right? And so you'd see like 5 of these on top of sandwiches and donuts and sushi stuck inside. And it's like the more outrageous it was, the more engagement that it seemed to get. And that's just because we get desensitized to what it kind of goes back to, which is, what is it that I love about the brand? And to me, I think if you don't have a brand purpose and like the why should you exist, if we were just around because we wanted to sell delicious fro-yo, I think we've had our moment and we've done quite well. But there's another reason why when I entered into the arena in '08 and it was such a crowded market, a lot of those competitors are gone or on the verge of being gone. And I think for them, maybe it wasn't the same focus that it was at 16 Handles. And so I know this seems to be a roundabout way of saying it, but again, I think the most impactful posts and strategy are really trying to connect with the customer in a way that you own that channel or you own that story more than your competitor who may sell, you know, the same or similar product. And I think the brands that do that better will certainly resonate than those who are trying to imitate a certain style because they see it working for someone else. And then it kind of, becomes either inauthentic or it's just like, oh yeah, not so much. Right. And I think we've all been critical of that, whether it's, again, a person, a content creator, or a brand doing it. And so for us, something we've always been committed to is pushing the envelope with all dietary celebrations. That's something that we kind of coined internally. And so for that, it was, hey, from day one, we've had the tart yogurt that Pinkberry brought back onto the map. When you mentioned actually HP Hood and Frogurt, it was really interesting because I remember I used to buy that product as well. So Frogurt is what's sold at Bloomingdale's at 40 Carats, which is a popular kind of a dessert or a cafe inside of Bloomingdale's. And I remember when I first came to New York City, I was like, I need to get the best tart. And so I tried to get, that Italian tart that Pinkberry was selling, not their exact recipe, but something close to that. Red Mango was another popular brand. And so I was trying to find something that was like maybe less tart, more creamy. So I found a substitute that was similar to that. And then I bought the Frogurt tart as well, because people told me that, oh, there's women in New York City who love going to Bloomingdale's 40 Carats. And so I was like, okay, here's my own kind of ABC test, right? And I was like, I'm going to have all three tarts out there and I'm going to base it off of data. So whatever I sell the most of is really what my clientele, is going to lean more towards. And so that's how we were able to get to ours. But yeah, like I think going back to that, it was, really about, again, identify what it is that your customers like about you, and then be able to just give them more reasons to believe and go deeper into that relationship. So for us, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, a lot of the partnerships that we did, being a lot of firsts for us, right? And so again, also not having that fear where sometimes we're going to flop, right? And I think when you are leaning towards innovation and being the first to market with something, that's part of the risk that comes with the territory. If we're batting 1,000 and getting it right 100% of the time, that that would be amazing, but that's not going to be the case for any company for that matter. And for 16 Handles, again, we were always fearless about trying to do what was best for the guest. And like I said, sometimes we delivered it well and other times it didn't, but it never prevented us from trying. And I think that's what also gave us grace with our customers when we would get something wrong, because it's like, hey, but they say that themselves. They're like, we're not perfect, but we're trying. And I think owning that and having that as part of our DNA, our customers, respect us for that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, to recap, what I've been hearing from you so far that, businesses can take from you is like, number one, really knowing your customer. What does your customer want? What are they doing? How are they doing it? Number two, innovation, as you were saying, don't be afraid to try things, trial and error. And then you also mentioned, the image that you have, who are you, what's your identity? And then there was a question, we have a couple questions I do want to bring up. And you also, you were mentioning how, you really worked on, you really had you made a sincere effort to think of flavors, to get that right, the right texture and consistency that you wanted. Bringing up a question that we have from Ron Tanner again. What do you think of all these aspects that you just brought up? What do you think separated 16 Handles from the competition? Was it the flavors? Was it the innovation? Was it your price point? Was it the image that you sold? What do you think was it that kind of made it over the top?
There's probably a few things that I could point to that I think we can try to say like made us different, but ultimately I think it does go back to kind of having that overarching lens of, we want to create the best experience we can for her. And that's going to come from everything of how we pay attention to our store build outs. Again, knowing that our customer was somebody who was an early adopter of technology. That's why, again, we were the first chain to implement and put those little LCD screens as menu boards inside of each flavor, right? In looking at it from a franchise standpoint, that kind of doesn't make sense. Why? It's not needed. Like, we didn't have to do that. Why are you getting 16 mini screens when a paper sign that we find at some of these mom and pops will do? And it's because, again, we want to be able to communicate our information in a way that she's used to. And so if she's used to seeing screens and watching her YouTube videos this way, then let's present the flavor in a way that's animated and that has all the information, nutrition facts, ingredients, and let's put it out there front and center. So that way, again, it's an act of convenience, right? We shop on Amazon. Why? There's plenty of other ways to buy but the convenience, like it's like they know us, fewer clicks, right? And so it was really a commitment to that sort of mindset. that I think allowed us to, again, be bold when it came to, you know what, let's be the first ones to try to do oat milk soft serve, right? Let's be the ones that also try to do flavors that don't work, right? But because it's trending and maybe it can work for us, maybe it can't. But I think constantly pushing that envelope, that's one of the things we did. What I didn't want was for us to just be another pretty fro-yo shop, right? And I say that, and look, no disrespect to, brands that are around that, that's what they are. But for us, it was like, what is the essence of our brand? And no, I'm not going to go so far as to say we're a challenger brand, but I did want to challenge the status quo of, hey, how is it that you have 9 other frozen dessert shops, some of which are your main, and they're national, private equity backed, national chains in frozen yogurt specifically. But the way that I think that we paid attention to details of sensory, information, product, all those things, I think we just, again, cared a little bit more. I think that's what it comes down to. And so we decided we're going to be the ones that just cares just a little bit more. And regardless of whether she pays attention to that now, maybe she figures that out later on and it becomes like an Easter egg. She'll appreciate, I think, overall over time that we're going to stay consistent to doing that. And I'll give you another example is, one of the things I did, and maybe I brought this over from my Southern California roots, but we were also the first brand to have biodegradable and compostable packaging, which I learned very early on in New York City. And I'm not talking about just the constituents and the consumers, but even just the infrastructure itself wasn't ready for and did not really care for, right? But that was something that was important to me. Because of that, though, we didn't abandon it, but we just decided, hey, for New York City, we're not going to come out here and try to be thumping tree huggers. But guess what? We are going to show a commitment by, pledging to plant 16 trees a day with this organization called Trees for the Future. And that's our way of feeling good about what it is that we do, because we go through so many paper products, right? All of our cups are made out of paper. And so regardless of whether they're composting at the store level, they can't, right? Just because the facilities aren't there, or whether the customer is doing it, it doesn't matter. It just kind of goes to show, this is how we're going to flex on what we support through our brand and our initiatives. So whether you like it or not, if you're a 16 Handles customer, you are helping the earth be a little bit more eco. You are helping some families overseas, a lot of times in these third world impoverished countries, figure out how to do farming and self-sustainability and eco-forestry. You are supporting that, whether you like it or not, right? But we didn't want to, jam it down their throats. But I think, again, it's all these little touch points that we just decided we're going to focus more on, and that's going to be a part of our brand. Another thing that we did, we were the first kosher certified frozen dessert franchise. And that was very important for us, especially because we grew organically in the Northeast, starting with New York City. And so a lot of the pockets where we grew initially came from markets where that was something that became either a starter or a non-starter, right? Like some of the markets we actually entered into, if we weren't kosher certified, we wouldn't really have a business there. And granted, we also have stores where that's not, mission critical, but again, just something different where we were able to initiate and ramp up our growth. And they were like, hey, there's these 4 things that makes them different. But it's not like we have to list it. It's not like we say, hey, 16 Handles, we're coming to your market, and here's the 4 things that makes us different. It's, I think, like I said, over time, and really only counts if our customers are saying it, right? Like I could be out there on a mic, I could be out there, brainwashing our staff to repeat over and over again. But ultimately, our growth and our sustainability as a brand really was through word of mouth, and that still is what it is today.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We have the comments coming in. It's really exciting. We have a ton of questions I want to get to. Evan Schwartz had a question. Hopefully I pronounced your last name right, Evan. He had a question. How important was it controlling costs to attract investors and franchisees?
The controlling cost piece. So I started the business in 2008. So, I have a feeling Evan probably is closely follows the market and understands finance, since he's asking a cost question. But not really the best time to move across country to start selling a frozen product in an area where it snows. Right? I love Southern California to do that. So really my mindset, Evan, and short answer is I wasn't so focused on controlling the costs. I made up for it by just having the lines out the door. And that's really how it started, right? It was, if I can build the best brand and offer the best product, I can figure out costs later. As long as, again, I'm profitable, I'm selling more than it is that I'm buying, right? Simple business. But as I looked into growing and knew that the whole point of coming to New York City was also to establish the first location and develop through franchise development, which is something I learned with the gelato franchise, I knew I needed some of those controls in place. And so, fortunately for me, my cousin Alex, who at the time was in finance, went the traditional route of investment banking, private equity, and I was able to get him to help me for a few months. That turned into he stayed with me for over a decade through this exit. But it was really Alex who then was tasked with making sure that we're able to maximize profitability, and he did a fantastic job at doing that. Sometimes to the criticism of our franchisees, but I'll tell you, especially as a bootstrapped company, which by the way, like that we were. This all started with a $600,000 investment from Alex's parents and my parents, right? And Alex is my cousin, and so that was enough money to open up the one store in East Village. Alex joined me about the following year or so, and we made it work. Like we hustled, we work our tails off to then be able to organically grow by way of franchise development. Fortunately for us, because we were so intentional about our growth by making sure that our store was doing so well, we boasted and commanded the highest average unit volumes, which is what a lot of these, specifically when it comes to food franchising, a savvy investor or a savvy franchisee will say, well, what's your AUV? What's your average unit volume? And for us, when we have the industry's highest, and again, if they don't believe us, just go to any one of our stores and you see the lines out the door. That's, kind of the intuition that, hey, this is a good business in terms of there's a lot of people that want this. Fortunately for us, again, like it wasn't something that we had to think of initially, but I will tell you this, Alex, again, being the CFO and being the one who has to wear that lens, that sometimes difficult lens, there were a lot of friction points where, he would be the one questioning me, like, why are you buying these cups when nobody's able to compost these, right? Like, why are we doing this? We have to do this. And so it was good to be pressed and challenged. But again, there were a lot of times where from a business standpoint, it just wouldn't make sense. It's like, we're spending 4X on this. We could save this amount of money. But for me, it was like when you're brand building, if the first things you're leading with are cutting costs and cutting corners, then again, it becomes the cheapest transaction that you could possibly maximize on. That's how I look at it. And for me, I think the sustainable brands are the ones where you're building a brand and brand equity and loyalty for long term. And sometimes that means you reinvest more and then you ask for it later. And again, our pricing model has also changed, and we're a pay by weight model. And so I feel that we were also more shielded to, certain ingredient costs or fluctuations. So whether the cost of milk or the cost of sugar or vanilla, goes up, again, we have 15 other flavors that carry different handles. We have 50 different toppings. And so we're able to kind of shield and have this blended food cost, which is also what made the business super attractive. The last part I'll say with that is we have the industry's lowest labor component, right? And I think that that's something where I didn't really look at that as being a huge advantage, back in 2008, where minimum wage was, I think, $8.25. Very different today, as it's now become $15 an hour in New York. But certainly the model itself lends to be favorable when it comes to that. And I think, we've done things more recently where we have self-checkout kiosks now, right, which is something that consumers are used to. So we're able to still work within the confines of making sure that this is a profitable business. But great question, Evan. I mean, we had to make sure that we were profitable. And we would not have grown if we weren't, because we would have been the one store, the first franchisee. And if it wasn't, then it'd be like this model doesn't work. But we were able to stay true to, again, delivering the best experience, reinvesting into things like technology as well as product, and still maintain profitability, even though at times it was challenging. But again, long term, there's a reason why 16 Handles still has relevance today, and people are still going into those stores.
But I love what you were just sharing, because it does remind me of, and I'm actually going to share on the comments, everyone, if you want to check it out. I did a case study on Chip City. It's a luxury cookie company in New York City, and I feel like what they did was so similar to what you're talking about. They bootstrapped. They started with their own. They had started with their own capital, and they really focused on their customer. They focused on their brand identity, and they reinvested back. Whatever they were making, they reinvested back, and they did things like, hire a social media team just to dedicate itself to social media and audience engagement. And, they're reinvesting, back into like more property. Instead of just leasing, they're buying like a manufacturing and distribution warehouse. The one thing I did love too about them is that they developed each franchise location that they have, throughout the tri-state area. they tailor it architecturally and aesthetically, the brick and mortar location, to that neighborhood, so that they're not just like coming in, like a corporate space. Like they're tailoring it so that it blends into the community. I just wanted to make a quick mention of that, and I feel like so that seems to be like a running theme to what part of what maybe can make a business successful, across the field, is like, knowing who your customer is, knowing your identity, right? And always trying to find ways to engage with your customer, with your audience, which I really love the similarities. I just wanted to mention that. I want to get back to our audience comments and questions. Got a lot of good ones. Derek Dujin Kim asks, was there any particular event that took 16 Handles from a small business to a large company?
Well, so for one, I don't believe that we ever became a large company. It's funny because there were a lot of conversations I would have, whether they be to branding agencies or ad companies, and they were like, "Well, you guys have like 500 locations across the country, right?" It's like, no, we don't. But one competitive advantage we had was when you can take pole position in the number one media market in the world, specifically for consumer, which is in New York City, that certainly lent itself to optically look a lot bigger than we were. But as much as I sometimes chuckle and enjoy that, the truth of the matter is, Derek, that we actually always operated as a small company, and that's something that I never wanted to lose sight of. There was a time when, again, we did an international development deal with a billionaire group in Doha, Qatar, and we thought we were going to be opening up 150 stores throughout the Middle East. And I just remember thinking at that time, wow, I'm in over my head. Like, I've never done that before. It's not something I'm confident I'm able to do by myself. And so at that point is really the first time that we looked in bringing on outside help at a very senior level, that I thought, hey, I need people who've had experience, opening up chains that are much larger than mine. But fast forward, it actually didn't work and didn't help. And, there were a number of reasons for that. But what I would say is that I think focusing on the things that matter the most, whether you're large or small, I think, there are large companies, I think, that also do a very, very good job of staying super committed and hyper-focused on some aspect of their business. And I think we all appreciate and have an affinity towards those types of brands. But for us, again, like my cousin Alex and I, we were the entire C-suite for, almost 14 years. And my team, even up until we were acquired, including me and Alex, there were 5 of us. So there were 3 other full-time employees. And so, I think being able to stay nimble and small certainly lent itself and had its advantages. I will also say, though, that's one of the reasons we didn't scale and become a national brand. You can't do that organically, bootstrap with just a handful of people. But for me, the mission was never, hey, how do I have the most number of locations? It's I wanted to be number one in the number one market, and I wanted to create a brand that could be lasting, right? And so I felt that I achieved what it is that I set out and moved to New York City for.
Wow, that's so interesting. I actually want to talk about your brand partnerships. You mentioned before, that was definitely like a critical, part of your time with 16 Handles, the work that you've done. And it's really impressive. I mean, with Skinny Girl, with Oatly, I know that Chef Duff of Ace of Cakes, he sponsored like a, favorite flavor or two. Arizona Iced Tea, you partnered with them. Talk about your work with brand partnerships. How important do you think it is for businesses to look for that kind of collaboration? Should it be at the front of their minds? And how did you curate? How did you curate and effort those partnerships?
Yes, I think it's very apropos that being a New York City based brand, again, kind of the fashion capital also, when you look at, consumer fashion and the influence that has. It was mission critical, I would say, because in and of itself, like 16 Handles, it's a self-serve frozen yogurt and soft serve company that I can go to, when it's warm, when I want to treat, or if I want to create something that's my own, I can certainly do that. But I think in order to go deeper than that and carry that brand resonance and also be relevant year round and to additional customers, I do think that having strategic brand partnerships and collaborations can only add to that. And we did that, early on. I want to say that a lot of companies that reached out to us, we kind of picked and choose who we wanted to work with. It didn't really become a part of more outbound strategy of like, hey, how do we grow our business with it, as opposed to, hey, this would be fun, this is cute. And I think that moment really came in 2020. And I shared with you, and I'm sure a lot of people who've looked at 16 Handles has noticed, we launched Oatly Soft Serve in the most meaningful way. And that was a turning point for us because one, it provided extreme high value to a CPG company, right? A consumer packaged goods company. The main product is actually oat milk. And I noticed though, one of the last food shows I went to before the pandemic closed down all the food shows was that Oatly was trying to launch their pints for in the non-dairy ice cream category. So I remember that in the back of my mind. And that was in 2019. And then in 2020, we actually 16 Handles launched the very first oat milk soft serve. And we launched that in February of 2020. And it made a difference. It made an impact. And I think at the time, because of all the buzz around Oatly and oat milk as being kind of the new kid on the block, where it was a plant-based offering, but it functioned very, very well within coffee. You had fewer allergens than like cashew milk, which we had done before the year prior. So really, we felt that, hey, this was like a very relevant, but also extremely interesting way of being able to use a plant-based alternative to get this, creamy consistency that we're used to. And so when we launched that, even in February, which is our slowest month, not just because it's the coldest month in the Northeast, the fewest number of days, it's just where we have the lowest relevance, right? As a type of organization that we are and what we sell. But we saw an uptick in sales. And so I was like, oh my goodness, yes, we finally cracked how we increase sales in the winter. And, and we went into March, really with a lot of high hopes. And then obviously we all know what happened in March. And so when our businesses were closed to the public and we had to focus only on all of our pickup and delivery, that was a time where, I was really questioning myself, like, how do we turn this business around? I'll never forget our April 2020 franchise webinar. One of the franchisees said, oh, this 16 Handles is a brand, we're done. No one's ever going to come into our stores now and want to touch handles and spoons and ladles that other people touch. They're butted up against each other, the machine, so we can't socially distance. I mean, they kind of threw in the towel. And I said, look, it's only been a month, right? And it's not just 16 Handles that's struggling with this, but that did stick in my mind. And I was like, how do we kind of pivot or reinvent ourselves or re-message what it is that we stand for? So that way the focus is less about that in-store self-serve experience. Because, I was like, who knows how long it'll be before customers are even allowed to come back into our stores. But even with delivery, like, how do we position ourselves, in a way that can still be, appealing, safe, and all that. And I remember we had somebody who was doing business development for us. I said, we need to reach out to Oatly, right? And Oatly, I know that they're the challenger brand. They're the company that put oat milk on the map when it, in terms of plant-based dairy alternative. And I know that they were trying to do stuff with frozen. So they're probably struggling because they can't do any sampling in stores, right? Think about it. Everyone remember in 2020, you didn't go to a grocery store or Costco to get free samples or to try anything new. You went for essentials. And all of Discovery at that time was online for direct to consumer. So I was like, okay, that's an opportunity that maybe makes sense for them. And when we got connected, it did. And it was at that point, though, I thought, wait, we're an agency, actually, in this setting. We're a retail agency. And so I remember having our graphic designer, I told her, I was like, we need to put together an agency pitch deck. And she was confused. And she's like, what do you mean? I was like, all the pitch decks that we get from other brands or from advertisers, we need to be that for Oatly, right? And think about it. Like, they love promoting and advertising outdoor. And at the time in 2020, I felt like every billboard, every bus ad, every subway ad was Oatly. And so I was like, they love outdoor, and we have stores that are facing the avenues. And so, I was like, we are essentially billboards from that standpoint, but also our machines are billboards, our cups and spoons are billboards. Fortunately, I was vertically integrated. The second company I started right after 16 Handles was Greeno Products. And so all of our cups, lids, spoons, our disposables, we would source from overseas and be able to then, bring it to the States and sell it to our stores. And so with that, that's how we positioned it. We did an a la carte menu. And I said, look, and it was a joke, but I went around saying this. So I was like, we're going to be the new SaaS model. We're soft serve as a service. We're soft serve as a marketing channel for this brand, Oatly, because they can't do anything right now with frozen because of the conditions. And so they love that idea. It was a fantastic partnership, so much to the tune that after that summer of 2021 launch and pilot, they re-upped again for the entire 2022 year, which is why you'll find an Oatly branded machine in every single one of our stores. And that then sparked this idea that I'm like, wait, if we were able to do this for Oatly, who else can we do this for? Who else can we provide value where, look, we have 30 locations in the Northeast, right? We have a consumer market that has very high spending power, likes things that are, higher end trend and all of this. So, we work with brands like another New York institution, Junior's Cheesecake, right? And for that, we thought, hey, what makes more sense would be Junior's Cheesecake ice cream soft serve flavor, right? So we launched that. And then it was, hey, Broadway, right? And we had done Broadway partnerships in the past, but again, how do we do it in a more meaningful way? Well, let's create, again, a custom flavor for them. So we did that for Dear Evan Hansen for their final curtain call in New York. I don't know if the news, if I'm allowed to share or not, but it's going out there. Lion King's 25th anniversary coming up. We're doing a flavor with Lion King. So again, it's when it comes to culture, kind of the one area that we haven't been able to check off that I hope the team will do is fashion, right? So once again, if we know that a certain demographic who would probably also be a fan of this type of product, how do we merge that? Where again, if someone's a retailer, whether they make yoga pants or shoes or purses, their customer base also consumes frozen dessert. And so how do we create something that ties that in together? And I think in looking at it from that standpoint, that's our unique advantage. Why? Because again, 16 Handles since day one of 2008 wanted to always have the most variety, wanted to push the envelope and create opportunities and flavors that were meaningful for our guests, for her. And whether she is now vegan, gluten-free, has a kid who has a nut allergy, whatever the case may be, we're going to be the ones that deliver on the products and have the meaningful partnerships to be able to create kind of the symbiotic brand experience where she's just like, yeah, I still eat it. Yeah, my kids love it. I used to go there when I was, and that's to me the definition of, again, like a generational success story of a brand that can last. Not just, hey, we got lucky in '08 because anybody that opened up a fro-yo shop in '08 had lines out the door. That was typically true. But it's like, okay, so then we hit the Great Recession. Then we hit all these other market conditions. Then we hit a pandemic, right? We opened up a store in Times Square during the pandemic. So for us, we were always, let's double down on consumer accessibility. And again, let's just keep trying. And I think those are the things that have helped us. And so, yes, these partnerships are not just for partnership's sake, but I think now where because of who we are, like I feel like if some of our competitors that don't do a lot of flavor development do a collab, it's going to fall short because it's like, but that's not really who you guys are. Whereas 16 Handles, you guys have always been committed to that. This now just accentuates what you've already been doing. So now let's reach higher and higher. And I think that's where it gets really exciting. And as those opportunities continue to grow, I think that's how, from a footprint standpoint, 16 Handles can now become a national and international brand because, if we can work with those international and national brands to be able to create more of that awareness, I think there's, again, a synergistic effect for both companies.
I think it's so impressive how, you were talking about how you were able to pivot, within COVID from focusing on like restaurant style strategy to like retail style strategy and how that really drove the brand partnerships. I mean, and then how you were just saying, you have to stay true to who you are. I mean, what advice would you give to businesses who, they want to achieve that kind of success you have while, maintaining an identity that maybe they still need to figure out, like maybe they want to be more innovative and collaborative, but they want to, they're hearing you and they're, maybe there's a business owner that's watching this, this live stream and it's like, okay, I want to do what Solomon's talking about, but you're also saying like you have to be true to your identity. What would be some advice for businesses that want to start being more open and flexible and adaptable, but maybe they've never done this before, this type of innovative thinking and strategy?
So the first thing that I would say is, and it gets overused a lot, but kind of like, what's your company ethos or mission? Like, why do you exist? And what are your true values? Not the ones that you'll put on a wall. And if you ask any employee, they won't really believe what they're reading. But even if you don't have that, if you were to ask yourself as well as your internal team, hey, like, what does the brand stand for? Like, what are the 3 or 4 things that really stand out? I think first, literally write that down. And I would say, put it up on your office wall. I remember that made a big impact when we did that in our support center. And that way we all see it every day. And if we're not doing it, everybody gets a fair shot of being able to call out me or anybody else and saying like, hey, this is why we have to do this. Right. And for us, it was self-expression, fun, and this celebratory moment. And so for us, if that's who we're going to be and what we want to promote, then the brands that also share in all or some of those ideals, those are going to be the good brand partners to then think about, okay, this could be interesting, right? Because it's like this, if you go into a conference and you don't know anybody there, you're going to probably lean into the one who either you're in the same industry or, like you want to find a commonality. And I think the same holds true when you're looking at potential collaborative partners is if your customer, who's ultimately like the biggest stakeholder and the most important person in the value chain, sees it and is like, oh, that's awesome, then you did it right. But if they're scratching their head, or again, people who are maybe are fans of the other brand and they're like, nah, that's not who you got, then it doesn't work. And so it's not just about finding brands that are bigger than you are to work with. I think it's finding brands who also, again, share in the same ethos, and there's a lot of similarity. It doesn't have to be exact, but it needs to be similar. So for us, I'll give an example, is if we were to work with a brand that was not about celebrating self-expression, right, or creativity and kind of like discovery, then I think that it'll fall flat, and it'll already feel flat as soon as you say it or you see it and be like, what? Like, what? I don't understand that. But because again, we from day one have been pushing the envelope, and we said like, hey, we're going to be the ones that try. Other brands that think that way, their customers as well as our customers, if they're not already the same customer, will be like, oh, okay, I see you. You know, we can try this out. And also I would say, like, don't be afraid to get it wrong. I've seen so many collaborations that I felt fell flat and didn't make sense. But then all you got to do is like get it right the next one, just improve. And I think getting over this, you know, hurdle of like, okay, well, if I got one shot and we've never done this, then we got to get it right. Like, don't overanalyze it. Like, if it doesn't feel right in the gut and your stakeholders, like your team and your best customers, don't feel that it's right, then I would say, like, don't do it. But if they get excited about it and you feel a certain, you know, real sense of excitement, then trust your gut and go for it and see what the results are. The way that we did our partnerships and our collaborations, and how, again, we almost approached it as an a la carte you know, ad agency. We didn't do that before. We didn't do that for the first 12 years, right? We did that now because we also realized, hey, we know how to do this, and we know also what our core competencies are, which is flavor development. We know how to create the best flavors. Again, the disposables, which again are another ad channel. So also lean into what you already have access to. Don't try to do something that you can't deliver on, because that's also the first way to kind of ruin that relationship with whoever you're collaborating with, as well as, again, ultimately your guests who are going to see that. And if you don't execute well on it, then they're going to be like, you know, it's almost like, why did we do that? We wanted to do this to make you guys excited, but we fell flat. And so those are just kind of some of the things that I would lean into, as well as try to avoid.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Solomon. I think that was really good guidance that viewers can definitely take to heart. We are approaching the 1 hour mark, but I really want to bring up, you know, your current endeavors, because I know that you know, although you love it, you've moved on from frozen yogurt, and, you know, you're a very thinking forward guy, it seems like. Do you want to talk about Java Brands?
Sure. Yeah. And thank you for that. That was the first question, specifically with peers in the industry. They're like, what concept are you working on next? And I think the thing that hasn't changed for me is, again, I am constantly going to be a lifelong student of consumer behavior and branding. Like, those are the things that I don't think will ever bore me. You know, I just came back from another conference. I've gone to 3 conferences in the last month and a half, and I haven't owned a company. I'm not even a CEO, but I do this also just to be able to stay on top of and stay ahead of and learn from others who are much smarter and have been doing it longer than me. And I think that sense of curiosity is what's allowed 16 Handles to carry without outside investment or leading experts. Is I chose to be a lifelong student of that. And with that, you know, I've had great opportunities. So when I would go to shows like Fancy Food Show or Natural Expo East and West, I'd be able to see from both coasts startups that were making an impact within food and beverage. And I'd also go to food technology shows. And, you know, a few weeks ago, I was in Grapevine, Texas for food service tech. So to me, it's how do we utilize technology to be able to further build upon brand and brand loyalty to the things that we're consuming. So that is, you know, a long-winded way of saying, like, that's my sweet spot. Why? Because I will never stop being a student of that. And I think with that then comes the value add that I'm able to bring as a strategic investor, because I love also seeing and building brands. And even though I don't have a full-time day job, I advise 4 brands right now that are all startups, mostly in consumer packaged goods. So again, I never worked for a Unilever or a Nestle or came from that world, but I think the same fundamentals of how do you take a product, make it number 1 in your category, outmaneuver your competition, and build a team that can support it to scale. Those are things that will be the same, right? Regardless of whether I'm a protein bar or a milkshake company or a fro-yo shop or selling sushi, I think all of those factors will continue to be the same. And so I think when it comes to that, really understanding the psyche of why do we exist? Why should the customer care? and how do we open up all the channels and become very relevant and also create the best product. Those are the things that I'll continue to do. So, jababrands.com, is my website. This is actually the first time I'm promoting that. It's been something that I've kind of kept for myself. And just so when I've had these conversations with other startup founders or investment opportunities, I would kind of lead them into that channel to be able to see what else it is that I've been involved with. But, I'm not starting a fund necessarily, not today, not tomorrow. But, for me, more so than on the dollar investment piece in terms of the capital, I truly love being involved on working on brands, right? Now working in it, I'm not looking for a CEO job or a CMO job necessarily, but to be able to work on the strategic direction and maybe even setting or resetting the vision of why the company exists. So that way 10, 15 years from now, we can be like, wow, like we made progress and we actually did deliver on the thing we said we were going to do. That's where my mind works naturally. And that's what I'll continue to do. So whether I start my own company, partner up with someone who has one, or advise and or invest into others, I will likely, again, continue doing that for as long as I'm allowed to.
Awesome. Before we go, I have to ask, what is your ultimate frozen yogurt? What's your ultimate frozen yogurt dessert? What flavor? What toppings? Sauces? Give us your preference. Give us your ultimate favorite frozen yogurt dessert.
Yeah. So when I get asked that, I mean, it's a letdown. I'm pretty boring. But the flavor that has been my go-to ever since we had it is our So Fresh mango sorbetto. It's a mango sorbet, and it uses Alfonso mangoes from India, the sweetest mangoes I've ever personally tasted in my life, which I actually was able to taste on a trip to India. And the fact that we have that, I think, is just so amazing. It closes out that whole circle of, oh my gosh, I discovered this mango that tastes like candy in India, and we literally have it in soft serve form. So, it's got that, emotional connection, but that's my go-to. It happens to be non-dairy, but that's not why I consume it. I just think it's the tastiest flavor. And I may or may not put, chopped mangoes in it. If I want to get indulgent, I'll probably put in like mochi to get a consistency change, but I'm a purist, and so if you find me in the store, like it'll probably be just that soft serve in and of itself.
If you see a 16 handles when you're walking in the city, will you go in?
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, I'll just pop in and kind of like, it's still my mentality, right? I want to see like, hey, is the store clean? Like, do you have customers going in? It's interesting now because I was just in the city, and because again, I'm no longer leading the company. I'm not in the marketing meetings. For me now, it's like, oh, this is what it feels like to be a consumer, right? I follow the social channels, which I always did, but now it's just like, ooh, like it's so rewarding to be able to see and feel and be excited, even at, 15 years after I started this, but now being in the seat of I'm just the consumer now, right? And it's exciting, and I think that Neil and the team are just going to continue to accelerate this. For me, like I want to read about store openings across the country now, so I get to now fanboy 16 handles instead of the pressures of having to run it. But I am available to the team as well. So I am staying on as an advisor, and, for whatever the team will need, 16 handles is my baby, and I will always be founder. So while I'm no longer the CEO, I'm not the former founder. You either are the founder or you're not. And so I will proudly hold on to that role and do whatever I can to support the brand.
As you should. It's your baby. Babies always come from one source. You can't change that. Well, Solomon Choi, original founder of 16 Handles Frozen Yogurt, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure. I hope you had fun too.
I had a lot of fun. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. All right, guys, that was the edition of FI Live. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, check out all of our great content, like past live streams, this live stream, which is now living forever on our social media platforms at www.foodinstitute.com, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. We're on there. Don't worry, we're trying to keep up too with the time. We are on top of it. But anyway, I'm Susan Choi, Digital Media Director. We'll see you next time on the next FI Live. Thank you so much.